Welcome back to the Cold Harbor Supply YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about all of the night vision systems that we currently offer today, including binoculars, hybrid systems, as well as binoculars. So let's get into it. We're going to basically have this broken down to several sections with binoculars, hybrids, basically devices that can be monos and binoculars. And within the binoculars, we're going to have articulating and then articulating auto gain and fixed gain. We'll put all the timestamps down in the description box below. And so if you guys are shopping for monos, you know exactly where to go. If you're shopping for articulating goggles, you know where to go. So let's go ahead and start with basically the gold standard, PVS 14. Pretty ubiquitous. Anybody who's into night vision would probably understand or know what this is. Very standard. We stock the Noctis PVS 14 housing, complete with lenses and everything. This device is going to have your typical power switch and manual gain knob as two separate controls. Industry standard, kind of a PVS 14 J-arm style mounting pattern and footprint, and kind of, you know, it has features like a IR illuminator built in, low battery indicator, manual gain, and takes a AA battery. Not a ton of expandability aside from, you know, putting it on a bridge via certain arms, but, you know, it does take other lens accessories like adjustable irises, rubber eye cups, things of that nature. So moving on from that, we're going to talk a little bit about the RVM14, which is along the same vein, at least functionally speaking, between the PVS 14, between the two devices. The RVM14 is a 7075 T6 aluminum housing made by AB Night Vision. Features-wise, it's going to be very, very similar. It's going to have manual gain, IR illuminator, low battery indicator. It takes PVS 14 pattern standard optics. What it does add, however, is the ability to take CR123A batteries as opposed to AA, so longer battery life. And also it has a proprietary footprint here on the top, which allows you to use AB's own bridge. And new for 2025, it also allows you to use the Noisefighters M1 binocular bridge that's also panning. Basically how it works is you would actually have to buy the RVM14 on its own, and it actually comes with a little arm that will slide onto the RVM14. And then as you can see at the top here, there's going to be a little divot which interfaces with the grub screw here on the bridge itself. And what's nice about this is actually offers a much more secure mounting than something like a PVS 14 style J-arm. So as an example, I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but something like a Tanto where you have the arm, which is a little bit cantilevered. We'll get into the Tanto in a bit. But using this system, you can essentially have the grub screw tensioned on, and it becomes a very solid and robust system that you could dismount as well. So in today's market, like, why would you want a monocular over something like a binocular? As an example, you know, if you want to go with something that's a bit more dual band, so if you want to add thermal capabilities, that's where something like a monocular system would shine. And again, what we currently recommend is the Noisefighters M1 bridge, just because of the fact that it's just so modular. We'll have a separate video out on the Noisefighters M1 bridge in a separate video, but you'll see this kind of make its appearance throughout what we're going to be talking about. So that is essentially your two main, I guess what we would consider full-featured monoculars by way of those manual gain, IR illuminator, low battery indicator, all of that. Lenses, as you can see, are going to be identical between the two. The controls are a little bit different. The IR illuminator button on the RVM14 is going to be actuated via push button on the front. Whereas on the PVS 14 is basically you turn the device on and you pull the knob towards you and turn again to turn the IR illuminator on. Gain control on the PVS 14 is basically a separate knob, whereas on the RVM 14, it's essentially once you turn the knob, it goes into max gain right away. And then as you continuously dial the knob, it'll actually drop the gain down low. So from a controls perspective, the RVM is a little bit more, at least I feel, is a little bit more intuitive. You know, as an example, when you want to turn on, boom, it's right there. It's on max gain. Again, no certain device is better one way or the other, in my opinion. It just depends on what you prefer. As an example, if you know you're going to be needing a monocular where you want to essentially have the gain down low to start, that's kind of what you would go towards. Just understand that PVS 14 is going to be a polymer housing, whereas the RVM 14 is a full aluminum housing. Both of them are going to be quite robust. Obviously, the aluminum one is probably going to be stronger. That being said, if you do decide to drop it, both of them are going to be drop tested. However, if you do drop it on the knob, that is probably one of the biggest weak points of these two systems. Is that's where we see these systems potentially fail. Is if you drop the knob, these knobs can potentially break off. That's going to be a repair. Moving away from these full-featured binoculars, we're going to talk a little bit about the Nocturne Industries Tanto, as well as the Boson Proton binocular. They're going to be a little bit different in terms of how they're going to be implemented. Both of these are essentially what we consider auto gain housings, being that it does not have a gain knob. The controls are going to be very simple. It essentially kind of works like a flashlight. It's got a push button control, so you click to turn on, click to turn off. Same with the Tanto. Both of these are actually hybrid devices. So what I mean by that is if you're starting out in terms of your night vision journey, you can get into these devices and scale up. There's a whole robust ecosystem to scale these up into binoculars. With the Tanto, you can actually buy 2 Tantos here, along with the Daisho bridge, and they basically, how they implement this is you remove the battery cap, and the Daisho will essentially have power rods where you basically slide it into your bridge. You would essentially undo these 4 bolts, and then this mechanism will hinge open. You would slide your Tanto in, and then you can reinstall these bolts. And basically what that means is you now have one power supply supplying both pods. So that's the way that the Tanto has implemented that system. The Boson Proton is going to be a little bit different from that, where yes, you have to go and undo 4 screws. I guess it's similar in a way. You do have, it's not a completely toolless install. You would actually undo these 4 bolts via the monocular adapter. You would remove it, and I have it over here. It would essentially look like this. So you basically, these 6 pins will supply power and allow you to power the device. These pods, both of these are fully self-contained, so you don't lose purge. You're not introducing any dust or debris when you actually go and switch these into different configurations. So the Tanto is, like I said, a pretty lightweight device. It's going to be substantially lighter than a PVS-14 or an RVM-14. We'll put the weights down up on the screen. These are going to be with standard PVS-14 pattern optics. We're not going to do the weights for all the different lens options that are out there now. So you guys, if you're considering different lens options, do a little bit of math. So, subtract the lens weights, add the lens weights of the lenses that you are planning on, considering for your build, and then you can arrive at the full total system weight. So all the weights that we're going to be putting up on the screen for this video are going to be with standard lenses. As I said, this is a lightweight device, so it's going to be, if you're trying to do something where you have like a dual band setup, where you're going to have like a larger, a potentially heavier thermal device, that's something where you might want to consider a lighter weight monocular, sort of offset a little bit of that weight. Another reason potentially why you would want to go with a manual full featured device over something lightweight is, you may not want manual gain. As an example, like typically what we find is that users who are more active, where, as an example, you're doing a lot of moving around, you're doing a lot of range stuff where you're not necessarily going to be sitting around and being able to dial in the proper gain level. That's where we see these ones being extremely popular. Because, as an example, a use case where you may not want manual gain is if you are, like you're outdoors, you're outside and it's full moon, and you've dialed it, or you're outside, you've got a bunch of lights, street lights, you've dialed the gain down to kind of compensate, kind of bring that light level down so it's not blasting light into your eye. But then you go and enter a dark structure, you now have to go and manually dial the gain back up. So that's another step, another thing that you might have to think about. So that should be a consideration between whether or not you're looking at a manual gain device like a PVS-14 or an RVM-14 versus something like a Tanto or a Boson Proton, where it's auto gain. The Daisho also, what's nice about this is it will actually allow you to have the auto pod shut off. So what I mean by that is when you actually have the device on your face and you want to roll the pods up, the Daisho will shut power off to each pod as it's rolled up. So you don't actually get a lot of backsplash, number one. And then number two, it actually saves battery. So you don't necessarily, as an example, if you're, you have it up on your face, you roll the pods up, it's not drawing any power at all. One other thing I should also mention is any articulating system is that if you actually have the pods rolled up, you take the helmet off, you take your goggle off, make sure that you power the device down, because we've seen a lot of instances where, that you take your goggle off and yeah, the pods are powered off via the auto shut off, but your main power is still on. And then sometimes what some users do, they'll just kind of put this back into regular config. It's now on, and then you kind of set it on top of a desk, pointing up as some overhead lights, and that's how you can potentially damage your tubes. So kind of quick little tip there for you guys. Just make sure that if you guys are utilizing this feature quite a bit, the auto pod shut off, is to make sure that you shut off your main power, and just kind of do a quick visual check to make sure it's off before you stow it away. So that's kind of the Daisho system. Let me set this off to the side. This is kind of getting into the hybrid setup. And this is, so basically I'll talk about Boson first, and then I'll move into the MH1 or the LLI's MH system. The Boson Proton is going to look like this in its monocular config. And then essentially what you do is you undo the 4 bolts, expose these 4 pins, and then you would get your binocular bridge and bolt these back on. One thing I have to note is that if and when you guys purchase this system, either one binocular at a time or as a full binocular, you'll probably want to send it to us or another dealer that has an ability to collimate these, because when you get a monocular, they're not going to be collimated to anything really. They're really going to be collimated to basically our naked eye. Whereas if you actually properly collimate it, they'll be collimated to each other so that you essentially have a fully, parallel system in both the X and Y axes. So this is essentially the Boson Proton binocular. This is essentially a pretty basic binocular auto gain system. Does not have IR illuminator, does not have manual gain. So it's essentially kind of a scaled up version of the monocular. It's essentially same push button control. Push to turn on, push to turn off, and that's really sort of the extent of it. But essentially, it's another sort of no-frills binocular device. Moving on to the MH system. So this is another what we would consider a hybrid device because of the fact that you can scale it up or down. What Lite Innovations has done is they now have released, so they started with the MH1. You can actually watch our interview with Lite Innovations. We'll put a little link at the top corner where you can watch the full interview with Claude. Where we visited their office and we talked about what the whole ecosystem is. But essentially, the MH1 was released as a full binocular system, but has the ability to be separated into individual components, similar to the Tanto, similar to the Boson Proton. The way that they implement this is actually very similar to the way that Boson has done it, although I think, I'm not sure who did it first, but it basically follows the same ethos. Similar deal, 4 bolts, the pod drops out, and then you can attach the monocular adapter to create essentially like a full-featured monocular device. So features-wise, it's going to be very similar to the RVM14, but you actually get the ability to scale that up or down via the whole MH1/MH14 ecosystem. The MH1 also has a roadmap to add panning via detents, and again, we talked about this in our SHOT Show video with LLI when we were on site with them at SHOT. So the idea here is that you can now basically switch the pod toppers, what they call pod toppers, to be articulating panned. So you can actually get some similar features as a system such as the RPNVG, where it pans out, while still maintaining articulation. So it actually has 2 degrees of freedom, so both rolls up and it also pans as well, which is very nice. Another thing that was recently released was their multi-battery compartment. So it allows you to use CR123s, AA's, and also has a remote battery port. So you can actually add offboard power. On its launch, this was only powered by CR123, but it's available. The add-on module for the battery is also available as of the time of this video. So that's the MH1. Unfortunately, we just don't have the MH14 adapter here, but essentially it's basically a bolt-on module similar to the Boson Proton, but with more features and controls. Moving on to the other hybrid system is the RPNVG. This is, I think, one of our staff favorites. They basically will put a link up on the top right-hand corner again for the RPNVG video that Ryan did. But basically, this is a device that has 1 degree of freedom and allows you to essentially pan to get a wider horizontal field of view. What's nice about this is you can actually, it's kind of like you get a 2-in-1. So essentially you can basically run it like this in a straightforward config, runs like a regular binocular. But what's nice about this is you can then roll these pods to the side and pan it out, which gives you a much wider horizontal field of view for more situational awareness. I will say that just from demoing to various individuals, agencies, etc., that it is going to be a little bit hard to get used to, because you're used to seeing, when you look through binocular night vision, you're going to be seeing, you typically perceive one circle. Whereas when you have something like this, you're basically seeing like a Venn diagram with some overlap in the middle. This is kind of infinitely adjustable, so it's not set. So if you guys can see, I can kind of have a little bit of pan or a lot of pan. Just one thing you have to keep in mind is that because the bridge is straight, that's why you have to basically pinch this and roll it out, because then otherwise your IPD is not going to be set properly. So if you're, for example, if you're in a regular straightforward Bino config, it's going to be 2 channels pointed forward. If you then crank them out, you are now, you know, your eyes don't really correspond to this point. So you actually have to slide these out so that your IPD interpupillary distance is maintained. So the reason why this is called a hybrid system, again, is the ability for you to separate these. So you just roll this detent or stop away, and you basically pinch this, and this whole thing comes out. So what's nice about this is it's kind of like a 3-in-1 system, where you can actually run this device. You can actually run this as it is with a CR123 on board. You can grab one of these Monocular adapters. Ryan went into all this in an RPNVG video, but I'll go through it again. You can slide this Monocular pod adapter on and essentially just lock it. And now you have a auto gain Monocular with an IR illuminator. It's got the built-in low battery indicator as well. The only thing it does not have is gain control. So you're still getting most of the features of a PVS-14 or an RVM-14 with the full modularity. Unfortunately, as of the time of this, AB Night Vision does not sell it as a monocular. So basically what you would have to do is you would buy the RPNVG first and then purchase the monocular adapter separately. So what's nice about this is you can run it, you can run this yourself, you hand this off to a friend, they can run this. You can also put this onto a bridge, such as a panel bridge. So you can bolt this via the arm, and you can run a dual band as well. So it's highly modular. I think, this system is a little bit slept on just because I feel like it's not articulating, but it's got, if you're looking for a goggle system that's got quite a bit of versatility and you don't necessarily need an articulating system, this is definitely worth taking a closer look at. This device itself does not have manual gain. It's an auto gain only goggle. Controls are simple: push button on, push button off. IR illuminator is gated at the top. We put a little cover here just as a force and force shield. We might release these in the future. But basically, this has a built-in IR illuminator, and it also takes offboard power via a LEMO port on the side here. So if you want extended run times or you're dealing with cold weather, you can also plug in any standard 4-pin LEMO battery pack, such as DTNVS or AB's own LP BP low profile battery pack, or you can use one of ours with the right cable. Just make sure you're getting the 4-pin LEMO cable and not the 4-pin Fisher cable. You can tell just by looking at the port over here that it doesn't have the anti-rotation half crescent moon. So that's how you can tell you're getting the right one. So tie down points, it's got 2 tie down points off to the side here, and runs off a CR123A. So again, pretty full featured. The only thing this thing does not have is obviously articulation and manual gain. So that wraps it up for in terms of hybrid devices and monoculars, which is kind of one. I kind of lump them all together. Then we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk a bit about the fixed bridge goggles. Unfortunately, these are not super popular because it's pretty basic, but but unfortunately, I think what people are missing out on is, and what you could potentially think about, is the fact that it's actually very robust. So something that does not have articulation is going to be inherently stronger than typically anything that has articulation, because you don't have a lot of moving parts. You don't have hinges to worry about if they fall. So something like an RNVG, typically, as the name suggests, it's a ruggedized night vision goggle. I've seen reports online of people like dropping these off a boat in Florida and then picking it back up like a week or 2 later, and then it works perfectly fine. Obviously, you want to clean out the bottom of the contacts here on the bottom, but this goggles, like the RNVG, is going to be very, very robust. This is actually a design that was based off of the Sentinel, which is also based off of the DTNVS 6 and DTNVS 9. So essentially how it works is you have these knobs that control interpupillary distance. This one has an onboard IR illuminator. It's auto gain, and it takes a CR123, takes offboard power. But if you're looking for something very no frills, very rugged, and something that you can really rely on, this is definitely something that I would consider. The only issue that we've seen with these systems is that if you kind of in a high humidity environment, or you are doing a lot of waterborne stuff, these contacts at the bottom could develop corrosion over time. So what we typically recommend is if you are exposing these frequently to salt water, fresh water, whatever waterborne environments, to make sure that you rinse these out with clear water before you put them away, and make sure they're dry, because otherwise, that's basically these these metal contacts at the bottom is what actually supplies power and et cetera and function to each of these two optical pods. This actually also came with a high rise, like a higher riser, just because of the fact that the distance between your eye line and the dovetail was a little bit small. So people were saying, like, they couldn't really max out, they couldn't really get this to work properly without the high riser. So, I think in the last couple of years, they've released a riser mount, which I think comes with these goggles now. We sell it separately. This dovetail pattern is actually compatible with the RPNVG and the RNVG-A. So, if you're like a bit of an AB night vision fanboy, you can kind of swap all of these dovetails around to kind of really dial in your position and the height of your binocular. That's the RNVG, bit of an older legacy system, but I think, still very much relevant today. That's kind of the fixed bridge, all the fixed bridge systems, if you kind of put these two together, these are kind of what's currently out there that we currently offer in terms of fixed bridge, with the RPNVG being a hybrid system. So, the RNVG, you get what you get, but you do get a lot. Let's talk a little bit about auto gain articulating systems. So let me just set this off to the side. So right here we have the Actin Black DTNVS. This has recently been upgraded to the DTNVS MG manual gain. This one that I have in front of me is the auto gain, the legacy auto gain version. This was very popular because I think, this actually came out before a lot of these other systems on the table came out. This was the first, internationally produced, internationally marketed ITAR-free housing, because of the fact, and then the marketing was actually phenomenal in terms of this, and it was actually marketed, and it still is one of the lightest binocular systems out there, just because of the fact that they have a lot of clever cutouts. It's got a proprietary blend of polymers that make up the housing. Still very much relevant today. The IPD, unfortunately, this one doesn't have an IPD stop system. It does, it's just an add-on. So when you buy it, it does not come with IPD stops. Whether or not that matters to you, you have to think about it. I think it's probably, at least in my opinion, it's good. It should be pretty important, pretty standard, just because, from my experience, just kind of flipping your pods up and having to like futz around with getting the pods lined up properly is a little bit annoying. But historically, this IPD system has always been available for sale separately, we wish that it did come standard with this goggle. So the DTNVS, pretty full featured in terms of, has a low battery indicator. It has, I believe it used to have an IR illuminator, although they might have since removed it, or maybe it's hidden. Yeah, it's down here. So has an IR illuminator. So basically has all the features except for manual gain. And again, we talked a little bit about why you may not want manual gain. So this is essentially an auto gain system. Moving on from that, we have the AB Night Vision RNVG-A, ruggedized night vision goggle dash articulating. Some of you guys might call it the ARNVG, or the articulating ruggedized night vision goggles. So think about it in terms of like, this is sort of the feature sets between the RNVG and the RNVG-A are going to be very similar, with the exception, obviously, that it articulates. Battery compartment is going to be in the back as opposed to the front, and the battery port is going to be here as opposed to off-board. So the only thing I would say, just kind of going back to the RNVG, is the battery port is sort of off to the side, which makes the battery routing a little bit odd. Whereas for this one, the fact that it's more inboard means that you can actually route it kind of coming off of this and back towards your helmet. Whereas this one, and maybe we'll put a photo of what the routing on the RNVG looks like on the screen so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Everything here has the IR illuminator on board, has the auto pod shut off. So when you roll the pods up, the pods will shut off. Similar to this, the Actin Black has that as well. The pods will shut off. Almost all of these goggles will have auto pod shut off, with the exception of a few other systems, which I'll name. They have tie-down points. The only thing I think is a little bit odd, and that's just my personal opinion, is the tie-down points are sort of on the pods themselves. So if you sort of put too much tension on it, it kind of has the effect of kind of pulling your pods like off of alignment. I do wish they put the tie down points sort of on the bridge itself, but that's just, again, that's just my opinion. Push button controls, the eye illuminator the button is gated, so it's protected. And you have adjustable tension via these two slots here. So you can do that with a coin, like a nickel, or maybe a dime, to adjust the pod tension. So we just find that this does not loosen up over time. It's not like, you know, once you set it, it's not going to loosen up. We found this hinge system to be quite good. The only thing is, the thing this doesn't have is the IPD stops. So again, you know, similar in the vein to the Active Black DTNVS, just wish it had IPD stops so that when you do articulate this back down towards you, that it did stop at the right place. I mean, yeah, you can do it and then you can futz around with it a little bit. Just find that the IPD stops is just easier to just basically be able to crank on it. It stops exactly where you need it for you. So the RNVG-A is going to be a full aluminum system, so it's going to be a little bit more robust. Where we just find that systems fail is for articulating systems is where the hinges are. So the fact that this is 7075 T6 aluminum is a big plus. Feature sets between these two systems are going to be quite similar. Kind of going off into the lightweight systems, or the feature light systems, is the Nocturne Industries Katana. So this is their third major revision of that goggle. It is now injection molded polymer and no longer 3D printed. This system is, you know, like I said, it's very feature light. So what it lacks is an onboard IR illuminator and manual gain. So this is an auto gain system. It does, however, come standard with an offboard battery port, which takes a double-aught B, so 00B LEMO. So it has their own semi-proprietary cable system. Has autopod shut off. Yeah, so this is basically the Katana Gen 3. It's polymer. They also have the Katana-R. The R stands for ruggedized. So essentially this is, as you can see here, side by side, it's going to be very visually similar. This is made out of 7075 T6 aluminum, similar to the RNVG. So if you kind of, you know, shopping between these two, the only really big difference between this system, the RNVG, and the Katana-R is going to be standard 4-pin LEMO versus 2-pin LEMO, and this one does not have an IR illuminator. What we do like about this is that it doesn't have a huge underslung, not huge, but, you know, it doesn't have the underslung battery compartment. And the only reason why I mention that is if you do have it on your face and you like to run it in this config, you can kind of like ride it a little bit higher and see under it. Whereas if you had this, the battery compartment is sort of in the middle of your view. Something to think about. Not a huge, not a huge issue, but, you know, these are some things that you sort of pick up on as you start to use more of these binocular systems. Adjustable pod tension via these two, Torx bolts here. They've actually, funny story. So they've actually epoxied these because I think people were thinking that these were tightening the pod tension, but basically they were essentially destroying the goggle because these are not what you adjust for pod tension. It's just these two bolts itself. So these are now epoxied in place. Features wise, between the Katana and the Katana-R are going to be identical. Easiest way to decide between them is, do you want a aluminum goggle versus a polymer goggle? Both of them are drop rated. But I would say that this one is probably going to be a bit more robust because of the fact that it's full aluminum throughout, hinge, etc., bridge, all of that, whereas this one's going to be polymer. We've dropped these. These are great, good to go. So that essentially wraps up for the auto gain articulating systems. All of these will have auto pod shut off as you roll the pods out of view, which I think is, in today's day and age, what I would think is table stakes for articulating goggles. So let me just put these off to the side and we'll talk a bit about manual gain articulating systems. So let's grab the MH1 here as well, even though we did talk a little bit about that. So coming from left to right, you have the Argus BNBD 1431, the Nocturne Industries Manticore-R. There is a polymer version coming similar to the Katana, so that there's going to be a polymer, like a Manticore polymer. The Lowlight Innovations MH1. There is going to be a polymer version of this also. I think they're going to be calling it the PH1. And then this is the brand new Steel Industries Nighthawk. Let's start from the left and move our way to the right. This is essentially Chinese made. Basically has most of the features of that you can find and expect on the market today. The only feature this thing doesn't have is auto pod shut off. So when you roll the pods out of the way, the pods don't automatically power off. And I think a lot of people on the internet, and especially, get this wrong. It does shut off if you rotate it upwards. So if you stow it vertically, it will shut off completely, but it does not shut off if you roll the pods out. I think you can also disable this feature, this auto off feature as well. It takes offboard power via 4-pin Fisher. So, you know, exactly the same as the 1531, except the battery port position kind of follows the previous 31 Alpha's position. One downside to this system, at least from experience, is the fact that if you do plug in offboard power, when you roll the pod up, because the plug is now here, it's not going to allow you to articulate it all the way up. Whereas on the 1531, they relocated the battery port towards the back. So you plug it in and then you get full articulation. So that is a downside of this particular system. It's still quite popular just because of the fact that it's quite low cost. Takes PVS 14 pattern optics, all your standard accessories, etc. So it has IPD stops as well. It takes AA batteries on board. It does not take CR123. Moving on from that, we have the Manticore-R. This is also obviously available in black. We just happen to have a tan one in the shop. This is actually a bit of a departure a little bit away from most of these systems just because of the fact that it has push button controls, although the RPNVG does have push button controls as well as the RVM14 by way of the IR illuminator. But this has full digital push button controls. So if you kind of compare the Manticore to the Katana-R, you'll notice that they kind of share some similar parts. There's some parts commonality, which streamlines production. So the bridge is going to be what's primarily different between these two systems, with the Manticore offering everything that the Katana has, but it adds an IR illuminator and it also adds manual gain. Push and hold to turn on, and then the gain you can actually tap to go up in gain or down in gain, or you can hold and you'll just basically ramp it up or down. So interesting design that is a little bit different from the more traditional knob style control, but very reliable and very robust. These systems, all Nocturne and LI products, do have a lifetime warranty. Built in, kind of what we call IPD soft stops. This system, especially now that they've moved into injection molding and full CNC aluminum, is going to be a lot more reliable. So basically how it works is you would roll it up to reset your IPD. You roll it down. So if you pay attention to these little half crescent moons, it'll basically stop here. Obviously nobody's eyes are this far apart. You essentially would force to overcome that a little bit and then basically stop. And then this is where your IPD is, so that when you roll it up, you roll it back down, it gives you a nice tactile feedback on where your IPD is. It's not a hard stop like something like this system or the Nighthawk, where you actually have a knob, and then, like, no matter how hard you crank on this, it's not gonna kind of go in because it is friction based. So if you kind of basically crank on these inwards enough, it will reset the stop. So it does have an IPD stop system, but it's more of a soft stop than a hard stop. That's essentially and also both of these systems come standard with B LEMO power, so you can do offboard power with both of these systems as well. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the MH1. This again is going to be another full-featured binocular. It's going to have auto pod shut off. It's going to have manual gain. The controls are, you turn this to, one thing I forgot to mention is it has dual IR illuminators at different wavelengths. So, if you want something dim or you want something a little bit more bright, it actually has that which I don't think any other system has. The Boson, like from years ago, had that, but now they've gone to this Lite system. So I believe this is the only system currently in the market with a dual IR illum. So if that's something that you're looking for onboard illumination, that's the MH1 is your ticket to that. We talked about the separate battery modules and offboard power. So, and also just like the full modularity of this, like what we consider the hybrid ecosystem that the MH platform offers. Finally, we're going to talk a bit about the Nighthawk, Steel Industries Nighthawk, which is brand new. We just got this for test and evaluation. This is a 7075 T6 aluminum. And it's kind of like, I don't want to draw too much similarities, but it's kind of like, a little bit like the 1431, but it's full aluminum. But it also actually adds auto pod shut off. So it's sort of an iterative improvement in a lot of ways over this. And obviously this is a fully original design and not a copy. It has a knob style control. So the controls, if you kind of compare between the MH1 and the Nighthawk, it's going to be very similar. Knob to turn on, and then the knob for gain control. So Basically, you have your hard IPD stops off to each side. The IPD stop system kind of works with these two little grub screws here. So you do need tools to adjust IPD. Essentially how it works is you advance, or basically you basically back this out or put this grub screw back in, and it'll actually butt up against these two little pads here. That's how the IPD system on the MH1 works. So it's a bit more discreet in terms of the IPD stops over something like the 1431 and the Nighthawk, whereas the Nighthawk actually has the knobs that are toolless, but it does kind of stick out a little bit. Features-wise, I believe this, aside from the dual IR looms, has everything that you will want in a goggle. I guess the only exception is it doesn't pan. So if you're looking for a panning system, there's only a few to consider: RPNVG and maybe in the future the MH1. But in terms of a full-featured, articulating, manual gain, IR illuminator, low battery indicator, off-board power like this, and full aluminum, steel Nighthawk, the steel industry Nighthawk is probably one of the devices to check that box, as well as the Manticore and MH1. So I would think that, in my mind at least, all three of these devices are kind of check all the boxes. How they implement it is going to be a little bit different, and you should think about, do you want push button controls? Manticore. Would you like to have something that's modular and can scale up in the future? MH1. Do you just want something that's kind of new on the market but has all the features and not a ton of frills? Nighthawk. So all the systems that we talked about here, and there's a lot of them, there's no one size fits all solution. There is a bit of a trade-off on at least like the Nighthawk and the 1431. These are going to be heavier systems, and not by much, probably about 50-60 grams. These two, the Nocturne and the MH1, are going to be a little bit lighter. So as you kind of go up in features and construction and durability, you're going to have a little bit of trade-off in terms of weight, as an example, or features. So what I always tell people is think about what type of work or what type of event or activities you're going to need to use your night vision for. Think about how you're going to be using your device, and not just today, tomorrow, next year, etc., and try to find a system that works absolutely, best as you can for those plans, right? So as an example, if you're going to want to go with a dual band system, like forget all the binoculars, right? Unless you want to run something like a Cody, like a Jerry C, like an E-Cody or RNVG-A. That will give you advanced thermal detection capabilities, but it won't give you something as robust as something like a Jerry YM or a P-Falcon/RH25, right? So if you're going to be going dual band, like thermal on one eye, night vision on the other eye, like forget all the binoculars. And if you want something that's modular, then take a look at the hybrid systems, right? So you can scale up or scale down. And then like I said, if you're going to be doing something that's a bit more dynamic, where you don't want to necessarily be futzing around with like manual gain and all that, take a look at the auto gain systems. So take a holistic approach to system selection. At the bottom of the description, what we'll also do is put a link to more of a written link to our Binocular Buyer's Guide down at the bottom of the description. In there also will be another link to what we call our night vision binocular matrix, where we're going to break down every single goggle, what features each one has, along with weights, specs, features, all of that stuff. So hopefully all of this was helpful. I know this was a long video. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. Hit us up by a phone or email. We'll be happy to help you out. Thanks, guys.